Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back through centuries of snoring, superstitions, and shared beds. You're not just dozing off, you're stepping into medieval nights where sleep wasn't a single block of unconscious bliss. Instead, you're waking twice, dreaming once. The villagers outside your candlelit cottage are already turning in for their first sleep, and soon you will too, only to rise again in the dead of night for quiet rituals, whispered prayers, or even neighborly visits. Forget memory foam or late-night doom scrolling. This is a different universe entirely. Cold stone walls, smoky air, restless livestock, and beds stuffed with straw. You probably wouldn't survive it without 3 layers of wool and a sturdy immune system. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is by you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into a small village in 13th century England where sunset equals bedtime. The church bell tolls and candles flicker out. The first sleep begins. People lie down early, often just after dusk. The rhythm isn't driven by leisure. It's dictated by the absence of light and the constraints of physical labor. Everyone's exhausted. And no, people didn't just sleep and snooze for 8 straight hours like we aim for today. Their sleep was segmented. This first sleep lasted until midnight or so. Then came a curious waking period. You might wake naturally after a few hours, sit up on the edge of your straw bed, and begin a gentle routine. Maybe you whisper a prayer, check on the fire, or even sneak off for an intimate rendezvous if the barn's not too cold. This in-between time was called the watch, and it lasted an hour or so before second sleep began. Oddly enough, many people considered this broken sleep normal, so normal that early physicians thought it was unhealthy to sleep uninterrupted. What was the point of this strange wakefulness? It wasn't insomnia, it was life. You did chores, wrote letters, smoked a pipe. Yes, tobacco found its way in eventually, or reflected spiritually. Historians still argue whether this habit was rooted purely in biology, our body's natural rhythm, or cultural conditioning tied to darkness, cold, and necessity. One weird fringe theory, some scholars suggest folks saw that middle-of-the-night phase as creatively potent, a kind of lucid half-realm where ideas sparked between yawns. This kind of sleep structure persisted well into the Industrial Revolution when artificial light slowly crushed it. Once cities lit up and factory bells dictated strict schedules, the 2-part sleep routine faded. Yet in many rural parts of the world, segmented sleep held on stubbornly, like an old sweater people refused to toss. Tonight, in our comfy modern beds, we call that accidental 3 a.m. waking a sleep disorder. Back then, it was just living. So next time your eyes pop open at midnight, take comfort. Some medieval monk probably did the same, stirred the fire, muttered a Latin verse, and crawled back under itchy wool blankets for round 2.
You slide into bed, or what passes for a bed in medieval times, and immediately regret it. The mattress beneath you was lumpy, stuffed with straw or old feathers that creak and shift like a suspicious animal. You pat the bedding down, but there's no hiding the fact that tonight you're sleeping with bugs, and not metaphorical ones, real wriggling ones. Welcome to the cold side of medieval slumber, where comfort takes second place to survival. The chill seeping through timber walls is no joke. Without central heating or even glass windows, You wrap yourself in layers of wool like a burrito on the brink of hypothermia. Families often relied on body heat, not just romantic partners, but siblings, grandparents, even servants might pile into one shared bed. Yep, privacy? Not really a medieval priority. As the darkness deepens, you notice movement. Something small and fast darting across the thatch above you. Mice, sometimes rats. They're frequent overnight guests, climbing along beams and dropping surprises. Below, in the mattress itself, bedbugs are standard issue. No one talks about them. They're just part of life, like taxes or spilled ale. You scratch at your legs and wonder when your last bath was. Spoiler? Probably last summer. It gets worse. That straw mattress you're curled up on, it attracts lice. And the blanket you're clutching might have once been part of a horse's saddle. But don't worry, the smell will eventually fade, or you'll stop noticing it. One fringe account even suggests people placed garlic near the bed to ward off pests. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or a genuine insect deterrent. Now for your head. You pull on a knitted nightcap, not for style, sadly, but to preserve every ounce of warmth. These snug, often brightly colored caps could be a family heirloom or homemade from coarse wool. You don't take it off even if it makes you look like a sleepy pirate with hat hair. Underneath all of this, you may have a thin sheet of linen, if you're lucky and not a peasant. Linen was prized for its smooth texture and supposed cleanliness. In wealthier homes, you might even have multiple layers: feather mattress, woolen blanket, decorative coverlet, and a canopy overhead to trap heat. But even in castles, guests still brought their own sleeping sacks, weary of catching skin diseases. The layout of sleeping quarters varied wildly. In rural homes, everyone huddled together in one room with a fire pit in the middle. In city homes, poor families sometimes slept in kitchens, using leftover bread ovens to stay warm. You heard right, bread ovens. One chronicled anecdote speaks of a Parisian servant curling up inside a stone oven to escape winter's chill. Not exactly what you'd call cozy. And then there's the snoring. Loud, constant, and unfiltered by separate rooms or walls. One person coughs, another turns, someone accidentally kicks you. You wake up twice, not because of tradition, but because your bedmate is grinding their teeth like they've just chewed raw barley. You begin to understand why some folks preferred to sleep outside in warmer months, beneath sheds, or even beneath the stars, away from the buzz of fleas and the slapfest of restless sleepers. Yet, despite the discomfort, sleep was respected, even revered. It was one of the few things free in a world of scarcity. And somehow, everyone learned to make peace with its rough edges. So, as you roll over and yank your nightcap down, keep one eye on that mouse perched on the rafters. He might be judging you. You roll onto your back and stare into the rafters, waiting for sleep to pull you under, but not without spiritual backup. In medieval times, sleep was seen as more than rest. It was a passage into a vulnerable state where your soul could roam, dream, or even get snatched by wandering spirits. That's why, before you ever dare to close your eyes, you murmur a prayer, a small shield against the unknown. Sleep wasn't considered merely physical, it was metaphysical. The church taught that during sleep, your soul might leave your body, drifting into realms unknown, watched over, or interfered with by forces both divine and sinister.
To fall asleep without a prayer was seen by many as risky business. After all, who's to say your soul would return come morning? You recite Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lie on, and maybe throw in a little personal petition. Please don't let me choke on my own breath, dream about the devil, or wake up possessed. Because yes, that was a legitimate concern. One fringe belief held that certain dreams, especially vivid or disturbing ones, could be signs of demonic interference or prophetic warnings. Historians still argue whether these views stemmed more from folk superstition or official church doctrine. Now, here's the fun part. People often slept with relics under their pillows. A piece of cloth blessed by a priest, a carved charm with saints' names, or even a tiny wooden cross stuffed into the pillowcase. One particularly quirky record tells of someone sleeping with a sliver of bone from a local martyr, because apparently nothing says sweet dreams like sacred remains. Dreams were taken seriously, especially those that felt strange or portentous. Noble families sometimes kept dream interpreters on hand. Imagine your personal assistant decoding the symbolism of flying carrots and ominous doorways. These interpretations varied. Flying dreams might indicate spiritual elevation, while water dreams could signal danger or change. The idea of dream literacy was real. Your subconscious wasn't just private, it was potentially public knowledge if you talked too loudly at breakfast. And the dreams themselves? Oh, they didn't skimp on drama. With sleep often interrupted, remember that segmented sleep cycle, the dreams were short and punchy, happening during REM rebounds in the second sleep. A peasant woman dreams of her cow speaking Latin. A knight dreams of sinking into a marsh of silver coins. A friar dreams of dancing skeletons, telling him to skip Lent. You wake up sweaty, disoriented, and unsure whether to report it or repent for it. Spiritual guidance didn't stop at bedtime. Waking up had its own ritual. You'd cross yourself, thank the Lord for keeping your soul safe, and sometimes even attend dawn prayers if your local parish was particularly hardcore. The day hadn't truly begun until you ensured that your soul hadn't wandered too far and that it came back clean. So, tonight, as the wind howls against the timber and that mouse starts chewing on something suspicious, clutch your nightcap tight and whisper your prayer with conviction. In medieval sleep, your bed was a battleground, and dreams were anything but harmless.
You curl deeper beneath the itchy wool blanket, but warmth only does so much to mask the fact that you're sharing this bed with everyone. Your brother, 2 cousins, maybe a servant named Tomlin who smells faintly of turnips. Welcome to the intimate reality of medieval sleeping, where shared beds weren't a quirky choice, they were survival strategy. Beds were expensive. Space was limited. You didn't just sleep with family members. You could sleep with travelers, apprentices, visiting merchants, or complete strangers. Inns were notorious for this. You'd walk in, pay a few coins, and be shown to a bed already half occupied. You squeeze in, roll over, and try to ignore the rhythmic snore of the person who beat you to the pillow. Imagine trying to fall asleep while someone you've never met whispers prayers beside you, scratches their lice bites, and accidentally kicks your shin. Sounds cozy, right? Historians still argue whether this constant closeness fostered community or simply made everyone grumpy. Either way, you didn't complain. It was normal. And complaining got you assigned the cold floor near the drafty window. It wasn't just peasants. Even royalty sometimes bunked up. Kings and queens often shared beds with attendants for warmth and protection. You'd think a throne came with a solo bed, but nope. If the castle was cold and security was tight, a lady-in-waiting might curl up beside the monarch like a personal heater with gossip privileges. There's a practical quirk here, too. Communal sleeping helped regulate body heat. 1 warm body? Nice. 5 warm bodies? Efficient. In some homes, young children were placed between adults like sleepy little radiators. And the whole thing had its own etiquette. Snuggling was fine. Snoring, not so much. One obscure rule: if your feet crossed into someone else's pillow zone, you owed them a meal the next day. Possibly apocryphal, but delightfully petty. Now imagine the late-night conversations, whispered secrets, pious debates, occasional gossip about the neighbor who smells suspiciously of brimstone. Shared beds became social spaces, more dormitory than bedroom. And because sleep was segmented, there was time to talk during that in-between watch. You'd stir, shift, mumble something philosophical like, "Do you think cabbage feels pain?" And someone beside you would answer with sleep-slurred theology. Of course, this intimacy came with consequences. Illness spread quickly. So did rumors. And dreams? Oh, those could be heard too. You wake up gasping, blurt out something ominous like, "The pigs are on fire," and suddenly the household wonders if you're prophetic or just allergic to turnips. Either way, your dream is tomorrow's breakfast conversation. One fringe report from a German village claims that a local blacksmith predicted crop failures based on his wife's sleep mumbling. True or not, it shows how interconnected sleep, belief, and community could be. Privacy was rare. Everything, including your unconscious self, was communal. So, tonight, as you slide back into your straw haven, maybe cherish that solo pillow. You've earned it. Back then, sleep wasn't just shared. It was tangled, talkative, and always someone's elbow away from inconvenient.
You lie still now, waiting for your body to settle, but there's still something off. A draft sneaks through the slatted shutters, brushing your cheeks with icy fingers. And even beneath 2 scratchy blankets, your ears are freezing. That's where the mighty nightcap comes in, a tight woolen hug for your head. You slide one on, and suddenly you're 30% warmer and 50% closer to resembling a medieval chimney sweep. These caps were more than cozy accessories. They were survival gear, especially during winter months when firewood was scarce and windows were optimistic holes in the wall. Historians still argue whether people wore the same nightcap for weeks or rotated them like socks. Either way, They were personal, practical, and sometimes embroidered with initials, because nothing says romance like matching bedtime bonnets. While most folks bundled up and snored through the night, some didn't sleep at all. Enter the watchers, people paid or appointed to guard others as they slept. You hear a faint cough and footsteps patrolling the lane outside. It's the parish night watch. They make sure no one dies, sneaks off, or invites demons in. One bizarre fringe job? Church sleep watchers, assigned to monitor anyone who snored too loudly during sermons. Then there's the fire. Not a roaring fireplace, mind you, but a small hearth that sputters out around midnight. If you're lucky, someone rises during the watch period and stokes it. If not, you wake up with frost on your eyelashes and a craving for boiled turnip. In wealthier homes, servants might slip through with warming pans. Metal dishes filled with embers slid between bed sheets to keep toes from freezing off. These pans were both cherished and slightly dangerous. A misstep, and your straw mattress becomes an inferno. The pan glows beside you now, hissing gently, and you hope Tomlin, the turnip-scented servant, knew what he was doing. Strangely, in some households, beds weren't even horizontal. There's a theory that certain people slept sitting up, partially due to superstition that lying flat invited death. Though the evidence is scattered, it's enough to make you wonder whether those stiff-backed benches weren't just for daytime prayer. Historians still debate how widespread this upright sleep was, but if you're trying it tonight, do stack some pillows and keep your armor off. Now and then, during the watch phase, you hear murmurs, people praying, others talking quietly to themselves. You listen in, half asleep, and wonder whether the old man in the next bed is muttering Latin or asking where his pig went. These moments create a unique intimacy. You're not awake exactly, but you're not alone either. So rest easy, wrapped like a medieval burrito in scratchy wool, with your nightcap pulled tight and the fire gently sighing nearby. Whether you're being watched by a sleepy servant or drifting half upright into another strange dream, you're safe. Probably. Just don't roll over too fast. There's a mouse under the blanket, and he seems territorial.
You stir from your medieval slumber, leave Tomlin and his turnip-scented dreams behind, and step cautiously into the fog of 1692 Salem. It's colder here, like paranoia itself has iced over the town. Everyone's whispering, everyone's watching, and as you arrive, the panic's just begun. Tonight, you're caught in the strange unraveling of one of history's eeriest episodes, the Salem witch trials. Picture this: two girls, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, niece and daughter of a local minister, start acting odd. They twitch, they convulse, they scream at invisible figures. The household prays. Nothing works. A doctor is called, and with all the restraint of a medieval diagnosis, he drops the bombshell. The girls are bewitched. Here's where it goes from creepy to full-blown horror movie. You, watching from the edge of the hearth, see how fear spreads faster than fire in a dry barn. The Puritans believed the devil could infiltrate your body, turning you into his puppet. That's what they think has happened to the girls. And once the word witch is uttered, it sticks like molasses with vengeance. Then come the accusations. You hear whispers about Tituba, the enslaved woman from the Caribbean who told stories of spirits and magic. You see her dragged in, interrogated, and under pressure, she confesses. It's not just a confession, it's a whole evil roster. She names names. Suddenly, you realize that anyone could be next. Historians still argue whether the initial symptoms were real illness, performative drama, or emotional trauma. Some suggest ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic fungus in rye. Others think it was plain hysteria, rooted in repression, fear, and social tension. You creep through Salem's snow-dusted streets and hear more stories. Livestock dying, crops failing, dreams of cats with human eyes. Everything becomes a potential sign of dark magic. Suspicion seeps into every interaction, and, unfortunately for you, you sneezed near someone important. Now you're getting looks. The trials haven't started yet, but the air is thick with dread. Ministers preach hellfire warnings. Neighbors report neighbors. One woman is accused for humming to herself, another for owning 3 cats. You watch as superstition transforms daily life into a nightmare relay race, each accusation sprinting toward the next. You rest tonight in a Salem home that seems quiet, but you know better. Outside, fear is setting in. The girls continue their fits. More are accused. Sleep doesn't come easy, not with stakes this high. After all, someone saw you talking to Tituba yesterday. You better start rehearsing your defense.
You wake to whispers behind shuttered windows. The village is restless. Salem's fog hasn't lifted, and the panic is ramping up like a fire fed by gossip and guilt. You walk the narrow lanes and hear the newest accusations, and they're getting wild. Now it's not just adults. Children are naming names. Neighbors glance sideways, and you realize something unsettling. This isn't about witches anymore. It's about grudges, reputation, and fear. Betty and Abigail's fits have escalated. They claim spirits torment them, spectral figures pinching, choking, scratching. The girls scream names. Women recoil in horror. One by one, townsfolk are dragged into court. You watch as respected community members are suddenly branded enemies of God. A woman who refused to sell her calf last year? Witch. That widow who lives alone and prays too loudly? Definitely a witch. And you don't wear green. Green is suspicious. Historians still argue whether these accusations were deliberate power plays or unconscious hysteria. But the trend is clear. Most of the accused are women, especially those who didn't fit society's mold. Outsiders, healers, loud personalities, widows with land. Being different was dangerous. Being poor didn't help either. You slip into the courtroom, breath caught. The accused stands trembling. There's no physical proof, just the girl's shrieks and dramatic collapses. The term spectral evidence is introduced. If the accuser claims to see your spirit committing harm, that's enough. It's a medieval vibe with a Puritan twist. You watch one man confess just to avoid execution, only to be jailed anyway. It's contagious. One accusation leads to another. Parents accuse children. Children accuse parents. Entire families unravel. You stand stunned as the girl you once shared porridge with sobs in court, pointing at her aunt, saying she saw her fly above the barn. And the crowd, they believe her. Fringe detail time. One accused man, famously crushed under heavy stones, shouted, "More weight!" a defiance that echoes even now. You wonder whether he knew it'd turn into legend. This wave of paranoia isn't just horrifying, it's mesmerizing, like watching society eat itself with legal forks. You see truth warp into performance, guilt into spectacle. You feel it in the way people clutch their Bibles and avoid eye contact. You're either innocent and silent, or loud and doomed. You escape the courtroom, heart racing. Outside, the wind bites. You pass 3 townsfolk whispering about the girl who sleeps with garlic and mutters in Latin. You don't know if she's cursed, poetic, or just misunderstood. But in Salem tonight, that difference might be enough to end her life.
You inch closer to the courtroom, heart pounding, breath fogging in the stiff spring air. The snow has melted, but Salem is still deep frozen in fear. Inside, the trials have begun, and if you thought the accusations were chaotic, wait until you hear what counts as evidence. Tonight, you're attending court where panic beats logic every single time. This is the court of Oyer and Terminer, summoned by Massachusetts Governor William Phipps. Oyer means to hear, Terminer means to decide. And oh, it decides all right, with a speed and certainty that makes your stomach churn. You squeeze between 2 town elders on a wooden bench and witness a reality that's somehow both medieval and performative. Spectral evidence reigns supreme. Spectral evidence means someone claims they saw your ghostly form commit witchcraft, even if you were visibly planting turnips at the time. That alone could land you on trial. The afflicted girls cry out mid-testimony, thrashing and screeching, claiming they're being pinched by spirits. You see one girl collapse and start barking. Another writhes as if tied by invisible ropes. The accused looks helpless, hands clasped, eyes wide. Your skin prickles just watching. The court accepts these fits as proof, because surely if someone says your specter attacked them, it must be true. Logic is on vacation. Even ministers join in, preaching sermons about invisible warfare. Historians still argue whether the judges were truly convinced or simply afraid of losing control. One fringe fact: the presiding judge, Samuel Sewell, kept meticulous records. His diary offers a bleak window into the moral gymnastics required to condemn neighbors based on phantom claims.
Years later, he'd publicly repent. But tonight, repentance is nowhere to be found. You watch as more people are indicted. Some confess to witchcraft, hoping to save their lives. The catch? Those who confess usually aren't executed because they admit guilt and are deemed redeemable. But those who protest their innocence, hanged. The irony bites harder than the evening wind. The accused range from elderly widows to upstanding churchgoers. Even a 4-year-old girl is interrogated for witchcraft, her tiny hands trembling as she's questioned by grown men in wigs and robes. She allegedly babbled something about a flying goat. That's enough. You sit still, heart hammering, as one man refuses to plead. His punishment? Pressing. Heavy stones are laid on his chest. More weight, he mutters, defiant to the bitter end. That line sticks with you. It's not just a fringe anecdote. It's burned into your mind like smoke on old beams. Outside the court, Salem is splitting. Some support the trials with religious fervor. Others begin to feel the creeping discomfort of injustice. You overhear a merchant muttering that his cousin was accused because she baked bread with fennel. Fennel! Apparently spices are suspicious now. Sleep tonight comes slow. You curl up on a straw bed in a borrowed cottage, listening to the distant sound of gallows being built. You don't dream, because dreams feel too dangerous here. Even in silence, your breathing feels watched.
You don't sleep tonight. Not really. You lie awake in a town running out of accusations and patience, where the gallows creak louder than prayer bells. Salem is exhausted, but the trials aren't finished. And now you're watching the slow collapse, justice buckling under the weight of its own hysteria. The tide begins turning, not with grand speeches, but quiet doubts. People murmur, uncomfortable with the children's performances, the inconsistencies, the growing body count. Even prominent figures whisper that spectral evidence might not be so reliable. You sit beside a merchant in church as he refuses to say Amen after a sermon praising the executions. Brave or foolish? Hard to tell. Governor Phipps finally steps in. His wife's been accused. Yes, even the governor's inner circle isn't safe. He shuts down the court of Oyer and Terminer, and suddenly the machine stalls. Trials continue under new rules, and spectral evidence is tossed aside like spoiled turnips. That small change is massive. Without invisible spirits as witnesses, the cases begin to crumble. Historians still argue whether the governor acted from principle or personal panic. One fringe theory: some believe political maneuvering, not just reason, sparked the court's dissolution. Phipps may have seen the growing unrest as dangerous, not for morality, but for power stability. Outside, life limps forward. Families collect the remains of their reputations. Accusers go silent. Some confess to lying. Others vanish from public view, swallowed by shame. A few victims are posthumously pardoned, their names cleared too late. You read list on the chapel door, names scratched out, replaced with vague apologies. It's not enough. The trauma lingers. Townsfolk avoid eye contact. One woman walks barefoot as penance. Another spends years refusing to speak, convinced her words caused a hanging. Schools don't teach the trials for generations, not until centuries later, when shame fades into curiosity. Tonight, you sleep in a house that still feels haunted, not by witches, but by regret. It's quiet, finally. No more gallows, no more screaming fits, just the soft hush of a town realizing it went too far. You pull your blanket tighter. You survived Salem, but you'll never quite forget it.
You lace up your sandals, figuratively, and step into the politically charged corridors of ancient Rome. Forget toga parties and marble busts. You're here to meet Fulvia, a woman who didn't just survive in Rome's brutal power games. She dove in head first, wearing armor made of wit, alliances, and sheer audacity. Fulvia's story doesn't start with banners and bloodshed. It begins with influence, wielded like a fine dagger behind closed doors. You see her first as the wife of Publius Clodius Pulcher, a popular but controversial figure known for stirring the pot in Roman politics. And stir he did. Fulvia didn't just support him, she amplified him. When Clodius was assassinated in 52 BCE, Fulvia didn't grieve quietly. Nope, she weaponized his corpse, quite literally. She paraded it through the streets to ignite public outrage and political pressure. That's how Rome learned Fulvia's name. Historians still argue whether this act was raw grief or masterful manipulation. Either way, it worked. The funeral turned into a riot, and Fulvia's political instincts took center stage. From there, Fulvia didn't retreat into widowhood. She leveled up. She married Gaius Scribonius Curio, another firecracker of Roman politics, who was equally aligned with populist causes. With Curio, Fulvia refined her networks, lobbying, planning, and keeping her hands firmly on Rome's pulse. When he died in Africa, fighting for Caesar, Fulvia didn't weep into embroidered handkerchiefs. She married again, and this time the stakes were colossal. Enter Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's protege, charming, volatile, and knee-deep in political rivalry. Fulvia became his third and most politically potent wife. You walk the forum beside her and feel the tension. She wasn't just a consort, she was a strategist. Letters, decrees, negotiations, Fulvia had a hand in all of them. She shaped Antony's decisions, sometimes pushing him toward bold alliances that rattled Rome's elite. A fringe tale says she once forged documents to manipulate political outcomes while Antony was away. True or not, it paints a vivid picture. Fulvia was no passive player. She was a chess master. Only her pawns were senators. Yet with power came backlash. Male historians of the time bristled at her presence. They described her with venom, calling her ambitious, domineering, even likening her to monstrous figures in mythology. You read these accounts and raise an eyebrow. Ambitious? Yes. Dangerous? Only if you threatened her. The streets of Rome are alive with political theater. You smell incense, dodge clashing egos,
and hear whispers about Fulvia's growing influence. Some say she's the real brain behind Anthony's bold moves. Others claim she's dragging him into trouble. Either way, she's more than his shadow. She's his storm. Tonight, you sleep in Rome, not just beside empires and marble, but beneath the gaze of a woman who defied every expectation of femininity in her world. Fulvia's not done. You sense it in the air, the pulse of power, the thrum of rebellion, and the quiet certainty that one woman's voice is shaking pillars built for men.
You wake up to the sound of distant clanging. No, not swords just yet, but political gossip bouncing off marble columns like saucy echoes. Rome's tension is thick, and Fulvia's next move could make or break Antony's career, and maybe the Republic itself. Tonight, you wade through the tangled loyalties and power plays that swirl around Fulvia's 3 marriages, trying to figure out where love ends and strategy begins. First up, Publius Clodius Pulcher. Their union wasn't just romantic, it was incendiary. Clodius was rebellious, brilliant, and often scandalous. Together, they were a power couple with grit. Fulvia didn't just host dinner parties, she hosted political revolutions. After Clodius's death, remember that dramatic corpse parade? It wasn't theater, it was persuasion. Her grief was political ammunition, aimed straight at the Senate. Next came Gaius Scribonius Curio, another firecracker. You eavesdrop on Fulvia in her atrium, discussing military funding like it's wine choice. Curio was flashy, populist, and charming. Their marriage expanded Fulvia's network, especially with Caesar's supporters. Fringe sources suggest she used his connections to funnel resources, like grain or soldiers, to strategic allies. Whether for love or leverage, historians still argue. And then Mark Antony. By now, Fulvia's a seasoned player. You walk alongside them as Rome buzzes with whispers. She doesn't hide in his shadow, she co-authors moves. Antony trusts her judgment in everything from alliances to appointments. Some say she even had the final word on certain Senate nominations. One anecdote? Fulvia supposedly intercepted letters meant for Antony, redacted them, and passed them along with her own edits. Real? Maybe. Bold? Absolutely. She's seen as the driving force behind Antony's hostility toward Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Their relationship, Fulvia and Octavian, is practically volcanic. She hounds senators to challenge his legitimacy, lobbies generals to defect, and even stages protests. A statue of Octavian is vandalized, and one local rumor says Fulvia funded it discreetly. Still, the line between manipulation and genuine support blurs. Did she love these men or use them? Both? You see her hosting a lavish banquet, charming guests with witty political quips, and later retreating to scrolls full of legal strategy. Her mind never sleeps. She wasn't climbing through marriage, she was building scaffolding for her own influence. But Rome's patriarchy isn't kind. Writers paint her as meddling, overbearing, threatening. You skim a document describing Fulvia as a scourge to proper order. Translation: she made powerful men uncomfortable. Historians still debate whether her portrayals were fair or skewed by gender bias. Either way, she was a political creature in a world that didn't welcome her kind. You go to bed tonight in a villa overlooking the Tiber, the moon casting long shadows over scrolls and sandals. Fulvia's playing the long game. Her marriages aren't footnotes. They're her playbook. And tomorrow, she just might rewrite the rules again.
You wake to war drums, figurative mostly. The cobbled streets beneath your sandals hum with tension, and every scroll, every whispered decree says the same thing. Fulvia isn't just behind the curtain anymore. She's center stage, spearheading a rebellion that Rome never expected from a woman. And tonight, you're marching beside her into the chaos of the Perusian War. This isn't just palace intrigue. It's full-blown civil conflict. Antony has headed east to deal with matters in Egypt, leaving Fulvia and his brother Lucius Antonius back in Italy to challenge Octavian's growing dominance. You sip watered wine and scan the news. Fulvia is furious, tactical, and rallying troops under her own political banner. She believes Antony is being sidelined. She won't let that stand. Historians still argue whether Fulvia's actions were driven by personal vengeance, love, or strategic foresight. One fringe account claims she donned military garb and stood atop ramparts during planning meetings. Whether literal or symbolic, she wasn't lounging in silk and sandals. She was orchestrating moves like a commander. You join her entourage, traveling north to Perugia. The goal? Block Octavian's expansion. The result? Siege. Fulvia and Lucius fortify the town, but Octavian encircles them. Supplies dwindle. Grain becomes rare. Water gets rationed. You chew on barley crackers and curse Octavian's strategic brilliance. The siege lasts through winter, and by spring, Perugia surrenders. Fulvia doesn't get applause. She gets exile. Rome breathes a collective sigh, not of relief, but discomfort. Fulvia's defiance exposed cracks in the Republic's image. A woman who mobilized troops, challenged Octavian, and set Rome ablaze, literally in one skirmish, can't be easily written off. Still, she shipped off to Sicyon in Greece, far from politics, far from Antony. And here comes the bitter twist. As Fulvia suffers in exile, Antony makes nice with Octavian, marrying his sister Octavia as part of a fragile truce. You picture Fulvia reading the marriage announcement, eyebrow twitching, scroll trembling. After everything, she's sidelined. Again. She dies not long after. Historians debate the cause. Some say illness, others heartbreak, a few suggest slow poisoning. Regardless, Rome doesn't mark her death with statues or poems, just silence. A pause before power realigns. Fringe detail? Her name is later inscribed on a few political plaques as a cautionary tale or a quiet nod to her legacy. Either way, she made her mark. Tonight, you sleep in a quiet villa overlooking a sea she'll never cross again. The waves are calm, but her story isn't. Fulvia fought, marched, defied, and ultimately fell, not because she was weak, but because Rome couldn't stomach a woman who wouldn't wait her turn.
You awaken in a world far from Rome, far from whispered accusations and chilly cottages. It's August 1963, and you're stepping into the heat, the hope, and the hymns of the American Civil Rights Movement. The sun rises slowly over Washington, D.C., and today, you're marching. Tonight, we dream beside 250,000 voices demanding justice. You grab your satchel, tuck in your sandwich, and board a crowded bus. Beside you, a teenager hums gospel. Across the aisle, a grandmother fans herself slowly. The drive is long, but the mood is electric. Everyone's dressed with care. Church clothes, polished shoes, hearts stitched with conviction. You smell sweat, hear laughter, and feel history stirring on the highway. Organizers worked tirelessly. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom didn't just happen, it was crafted with precision. Led by civil rights giants like A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin. Rustin, a brilliant tactician, often in the background due to his sexuality, managed logistics so deftly you'd think he was part of NASA's ground team. Historians still argue whether he was the real architect behind the march's success. You arrive at the National Mall, and the scene overwhelms you. Flags wave gently, signs rise above heads, jobs not jails, freedom now. People share water, swap stories, and stake out shaded spots beneath trees. The Lincoln Memorial looms ahead, stoic and watchful. Fringe detail? A few attendees fainted from heat exhaustion but refused to leave, choosing protest over paramedics. The commitment runs deep. The crowd includes union workers, clergy, celebrities, students, veterans, artists, and toddlers clutching stuffed bears. You step carefully among them, absorbing the tension and tenderness alike. Everyone's waiting, hoping that this massive show of unity will break through political resistance. Eyes scan rooftops. FBI agents watch from shadows. Surveillance buzzes quietly, feeding files that will haunt activists for decades. Yet the message is clear, dignified, peaceful, organized. Despite concerns, not one window is broken, not one act of violence mars the day. As you settle on the grass near a veteran with a homemade banner, you hear someone reciting poetry softly. It feels less like rebellion and more like renewal. You join hands with strangers during songs. "We shall overcome" floats through the air with aching optimism. Vendors pass out icy drinks. A teenager nervously practices her chant. One woman breaks into tears just looking at the Lincoln statue. The march builds hour by hour, a crescendo of hope, gathering like thunderclouds full of righteous rain. You know you're part of something seismic, not just for Black Americans, but for all people who believe in equality, dignity, and peace. Tonight, you won't sleep in a medieval straw bed or in a Roman villa. You'll rest in a motel near the Capitol, surrounded by exhausted feet, wrinkled signs, and the rumble of change. A march that began with prayer and planning now glows across the country like a bonfire, steady, beautiful, urgent.
You rise early in your DC motel room, heart still humming with the echoes of gospel songs and chants from yesterday's march. But today is different. Today you stand among a sea of shoulders and sun hats at the edge of history's heartbeat, waiting for one voice to rise above them all. And when it does, your breath halts. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. steps to the podium at the Lincoln Memorial, flanked by dignitaries and dreamers alike. You shift your weight on worn sneakers, leaning forward, ears tuned to every syllable. The crowd hushes, a reverent silence rippling across the reflecting pool like a prayer. And then he speaks. I have a dream. His cadence is slow, deliberate. His words spiral into the air like incense, settling on shoulders, filling chests, bringing tears. You feel it, that line, that promise, that dream. Not just his, yours now too. The speech wasn't originally planned to include those words. King had spoken parts of it before, but Mahalia Jackson called out, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And he did. Scholars still debate whether that moment was improvised inspiration or divine timing. Either way, it changed the world. The dream is vivid. Children holding hands across racial lines, justice rolling like water, freedom ringing from every mountainside. You watch toddlers clutching paper flags, elderly folks nodding, a soldier blinking hard behind his sunglasses. You stand between strangers, bound by shared hope, rooted in collective pain. And here's a fringe moment that warms you. As King spoke, some in the crowd hummed softly in approval, an improvised harmony echoing each phrase like the speech was a sermon and the National Mall a cathedral. After the speech, the applause isn't explosive, it's reverent, like people know they've witnessed something sacred. You walk slowly away, joining the steady stream of listeners now transformed. Some are silent, others talk in excited bursts. Everyone feels it. You spend the evening in quiet reflection, sitting by the Potomac with a cold cola and warm thoughts. Somewhere behind you, cleanup crews fold chairs and pack banners, but the dream's already on the wind. You breathe it in and know you'll carry it, whether marching tomorrow or speaking truth at work. Tonight's sleep is peaceful, finally, like the country has exhaled. But deep down, you know the work isn't done. The speech is immortal, but the dream demands feet on pavement, voices raised, laws rewritten. So dream with purpose tonight. King's words didn't just echo, they planted, and you, in your cozy sheets near Capitol Hill, are part of what blooms next.
You awake in your Capitol Hill motel room with sunlight pouring in across paper flyers and day-old posters. The march is over, but the movement, very much alive. And tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you walk through the unfolding chapters that came after King's iconic speech. Because the dream didn't pause at the Lincoln Memorial, it marched past the moment. You overhear activists talking over breakfast, still energized but quietly wary. Beneath their smiles is grit. You sense tension. how to keep momentum alive without letting it burn out or break apart. The March on Washington was breathtaking, sure, but systemic change is a marathon, not a one-day rally. Inside movement circles, strategic debates arise. Some push for economic equity. Others want federal legislation now. People disagree, sometimes bitterly, over nonviolence versus more radical approaches. Historians still argue whether the civil rights movement's internal divisions helped diversify its tactics or slowed its progress. And surveillance? Oh, it ramps up fast. You flip through newspapers and spot vague mentions of government monitoring. Behind closed doors, the FBI is compiling thick files on King and others, convinced that civil rights equals subversion. A fringe note? They even tapped phones and bugged hotel rooms. It's unsettling, and it continues quietly for years. Despite the pressure, victories emerge. The Civil Rights Act passes in '64, and the Voting Rights Act in '65. You watch footage of marches, sit-ins, and freedom riders reshaping the landscape. But backlash is real, violent, cruel, resistant. You feel it in the funerals, the flames, the headlines. Change, as always, comes at a cost. Some marchers disappear from the spotlight, but keep organizing locally, registering voters, tutoring kids, lobbying city councils. Others burn out or pivot to other causes. The dream lives on, but like any dream, it evolves. You sense it in music, art, classrooms, sermons. It's whispered, shouted, and reimagined every day. You walk past a mural being painted, King's face rising above clouds, surrounded by words like justice, hope, dignity. A teenager stares at it, nodding slowly, pen in hand, ready to write her own lines. Tonight you sleep not in medieval squalor, not under Roman columns, but in a room touched by legacy. One pillow, one lamp, one unfinished chapter waiting on the nightstand. Because dreaming doesn't end, and the most powerful dreams, they walk beside us into each dawn.
The journey tonight was long and layered, woven through drafty cottages, haunted courtrooms, Roman battlegrounds, and a sea of signs in Washington. And now you feel it, the slow exhale, the hush between thoughts, the subtle weight of history settling around you like a thick, cozy blanket. Your pillow welcomes you back, softer now. The stories blur gently, no longer sharp dramas, but drifting shadows beneath closed lids. Fulvia's fire, Salem's fear, the shared beds and segmented sleeps, their distant footsteps on ancient floors. Even King's voice fades not with silence, but with rhythm, each word echoing in slow motion, tucked away inside you. You carry that speech now, not just as memory, but mission, because every age has its midnight watch, and every soul its dream worth protecting. You curl inward slightly, the hum of the fan brushing past. Outside, the world waits, still complicated, still unfair, still full of astonishing courage. But for now, for this quiet moment, you rest, because even the boldest minds need peace. And sometimes, the most radical act is to close your eyes and believe in better.